Good afternoon, Councillor Adrian.
Hello, good afternoon.
All right, very happy to see you. We'll start in 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Darlene.
Thank you. Welcome to the 14th ASEAN-Australia Counter-Trafficking webinar series on adaptive justice responses on trafficking in persons under the new normal. It never fails to excite me to see many attendees participating from around the world, government counterparts and partners in the ASEAN region and beyond. At the moment, we now have more than 300 registrants, with many still coming in. Thank you for joining us in recognition of the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities, the 3rd day of December. This webinar will bring to light much needed discourse on disability and human trafficking. I am Darlene Pajarito, the Justice Systems Director of ASEAN-Australia Counter-Trafficking, dialing in from the Philippines. I will be your host for today's webinar, joined by my colleague Chanapat Maridul in Thailand. Before we proceed, here are the house rules.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. We would like to make this virtual event a pleasing and productive experience. To make this happen, the organizers request all participants to observe the following house rules. You may use the chat box when you want to provide inputs or comments. For documentation purposes, this event will be recorded. If you require special assistance to take part in this event, please notify our event organizers so that we can accommodate to your needs. Please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen to select the language of your choice. Our interpreters are on standby. Lastly, as we are in a virtual environment, we will be kind to one another in case of internet connection issues. We will expect unavoidable technical difficulties. Feel free to join back if you're disconnected. Everyone's patience will be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, team. To listen to our speakers in your preferred language, we have customized interpretation channels for English, Bahasa Indonesia, Lao, Myanmar, Thai, and Vietnamese. Now, if you want to listen in Cambodia, Khmer, please click on the Spanish channel for interpretation. Now, to officially open and welcome you to our final webinar for the year, I am honored to introduce Acting Councillor Adrian Gilbert, Australian Mission to ASEAN, to deliver his opening remarks. The virtual floor is yours, Councillor.
Thank you, Darlene. Counter-trafficking partners, practitioners, advocates, and other distinguished colleagues from around the ASEAN region and beyond. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the final ASEAN-Australia Counter-Trafficking webinar for 2022, titled Disability is Not a Barrier, Discrimination Is, Promoting Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Combating Human Trafficking. The Australian government, through the ASEAN-Australia Counter-Trafficking Program, known to most of you as ASEAN-ACT, is proud to be supporting this webinar series to continue discussion on countering trafficking in persons in the ASEAN region, with a focus on victim rights and gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. Our discussion today is part of Australia's commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, IDPWD. On or around 3 December each year, we take time to reflect on the barriers faced by persons with disabilities around the world in accessing economic, social, and political opportunities, as well as the achievements and contributions of persons with disabilities in all walks of life. This year's theme is Transformative Solutions for Inclusive Development, the role of innovation in fueling an accessible and equitable world. The theme encourages us to think creatively about the linkages between employment, knowledge, and skills in a rapidly changing technological landscape, and how assistive technologies can increase access to employment and be mainstreamed in the workplace. This theme is important in the context of vulnerability to trafficking in persons, as we know that lack of access to employment is one of the key drivers of trafficking in the ASEAN region. We're also encouraged to reflect on the accessibility of our own workplaces, our policies and practices, and to identify ways in which the workplace can be more inclusive, particularly through the use of technologies, such as the platform we're meeting on today, which can significantly increase access and connectivity. A person with disability and their family are less likely to have access to employment, education, skills training, and rehabilitation. As a result, they are more likely to be vulnerable to trafficking and exploitation. This webinar today aims to raise awareness of an issue that has received little attention. As the UN Special Rapporteur in trafficking in persons has highlighted on a number of occasions, there is a significant knowledge gap on the extent to which persons with disabilities are vulnerable to trafficking. Little is also known about the experiences of traffic victims with disability in accessing justice and support. ASEAN-ACT's 2020 baseline report on trafficking in persons data in ASEAN reported that data on trafficking in persons disaggregated by disability is not collected or reported by any ASEAN member state. Without available data and an evidence base, it is very difficult for policymakers and practitioners to develop and implement appropriate responses that address the complex drivers of trafficking in persons and the individualized needs of victims. In addition to a lack of evidence on the nexus between disability and trafficking in persons, we also see a lack of awareness and ability to identify, protect, and support trafficked victims with disability. Given not all disabilities are visible, it is particularly critical that frontline responders, those who have first contact with a potential victim of trafficking, are aware of the different types of impairment, as well as the barriers that combine to create the individual experience of disability. Victims with a disability, be it physical or psychosocial impairment, will experience barriers in accessing information, accommodation, appropriate support and services they need to recover and seek redress. To canvass the range of issues associated with disability and trafficking in persons, and to explore some of the counter-trafficking measures currently in place to address these issues, ASEAN-ACT has brought together an expert panel from across the region. And today, we are very honored to have the Honorable Just Bambang Heri Mulyono, Head of Research and Development and Education and Judicial Training Agency, Supreme Court of the Republic of Indonesia. Ms. Nguyen Kilan An, Founder and Director of Action to the Community Development Institute, and Ms. Sawalak Tongwe, Co-Founder and Steering Committee Member, ASEAN Disability Forum, Thailand. With this expert panel and the collective knowledge in the virtual room today, I am confident that this webinar will generate important learnings for us all as counter-trafficking actors committed to pursuing human rights-based approaches to countering trafficking, including for persons with disability, in line with our obligations under the ASEAN Convention Against Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, as well as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which all ASEAN member states are party to. The Australian government, as a strong and consistent advocate for disability inclusion in international forums, is proud to be supporting ASEAN and its member states to promote fair and accessible access to justice for persons with disabilities. Our Disability Rights in ASEAN project, or DRIA, which concluded in June this year, supported the development and implementation of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, mainstreaming the rights of persons with disabilities. We supported inclusive COVID-19 response and recovery through capacity building of ASEAN Secretariat, sectoral bodies, and organizations of persons with disabilities. The project has developed accessible online materials for persons with disabilities on how to use the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan and advocate for disability rights. Throughout the pandemic, DRIA assisted the ASEAN Secretariat and the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or ACHA, to engage persons with disabilities in dialogues and webinars on disability rights. Our technical inputs are supporting sectoral bodies on disability inclusive work planning, monitoring and evaluation for the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan. On behalf of the Australian Government, thank you for your strong interest and participation in ASEAN-ACT hosted webinars throughout the year. We plan to continue this popular series in 2023 and look forward to your future participation. And I look forward to this important discussion, which will contribute towards an accessible and equitable justice system where no one is left behind. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Acting Councillor Adrian Gilbert, for your inspiring remarks, highlighting awareness and disability inclusiveness, and of course, the continued support of the Australian government. May I kindly request our distinguished guests to please turn on your cameras now for a group photo. Our team will take the screenshot. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. And let's have another one with the wave, please. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. There you go. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you for the big smile. I'm very honored to have moderated 13 previous webinars in the last 2 years, relying on the audience feedback to continuously improve and expand our efforts. I will share with you now the feedback from our last webinar held on the 7th of October. And the webinar topic was Protection and Beyond, Models that Support Traffic Victims' Access to Justice. Our team will share this one slide of the 13th webinar feedback. There you go. We had participants from the government and non-government agencies working on counter-trafficking responses, and 95% said that the topic was relevant to their work. Our speakers included a Filipino diplomat stationed in Syria, a human rights lawyer, legal aid provider from Australia, and an NGO advocate from Lao PDR, who all talked about the respective support services they provide to traffic victims, including the good practices. So 95% of our viewers said they were knowledgeable, while 93% said that they learned something new and that the webinar was very useful. So I would like to share one compelling comment from a participant, open quote, "I am working to support the victims of human trafficking within the domestic and cross-border types of cases. I will apply my learning from this webinar by developing policies and guidelines to support the TIF victims at the national and community levels. I will also coordinate with the frontline social workers to support the victims at the grassroots levels," close quote. So posted now in the chat box by our team is the feedback link for our webinar series today. So at the end of this webinar, we will again be asking all of you to support in completing the one-page feedback form, for which you will receive a certificate of attendance upon completion of this feedback form. Also posted in the link is our ASEAN-ACT portal. The Zoom recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint presentations and materials will be uploaded here after the webinar. So please save these 2 important links. Thank you. I'm very excited to learn from our panel of experts. Given the wide range of issues correlating with disability and human trafficking, we will have the opportunity to listen, to hear perspectives both from the government and civil society organizations at national and regional level. So in this webinar, there will be discussion on the link between disability and human trafficking, the importance of disability awareness in counter-trafficking responses, and the individualized needs of victims or survivors. And of course, some discussion on policy and practice recommendations to improve the inclusiveness and accessibility of counter-trafficking responses and promote the agency of victims of trafficking. But before we hear from our esteemed speakers, we would like to get your thoughts on this topic first. Please answer 2 poll questions. No identification will be asked from you um, when you answer these questions, and the results generated from these poll questions will be used solely for this webinar. And of course, as you now see the questions, allow me to read the poll questions for purposes of translation. First question: what must be prioritized to ensure persons with disabilities effectively access justice? First, training for justice and non-justice actors. Second, accessibility and reasonable accommodations. Third, national budget allocation. Fourth, laws and policies on disability. Second poll question: what most hinders the protection of persons with disabilities in the justice system? First, lack of data to measure interventions. Second, weak legal framework on disability. Third, lack of understanding of the intersectionality of disability, particularly human trafficking. Fourth, no adequate measures to ensure persons with disabilities access justice. And the fifth, lack of meaningful participation of persons with disabilities in accessing justice. So please click on your preferred answer. We'll present the poll results after the presentations of our speakers. This will be open and to give you time to answer. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation in our audience poll. All right. Now I am honored to introduce our first speaker. Ms. Sawalak Tongwai is one of the founding members of the ASEAN Disability Forum since 2011 and founder of the Asia Pacific Women and Disabilities United Working Group since 2013. She chairs the Association for the Empowerment of Women and Disabilities and is a member of several notable boards and committees as a key advocate for disability rights. Ms. Sawalak has authored several journal articles contributing valuable knowledge and evidence in the field of the rights of persons with disabilities. Her training spans Europe and Asia, and she holds a master's in human resource development. She received an Outstanding Women Award on Women Leadership, promoting human rights in 2008 and 2016, the National Council of Women of Thailand under the royal patronage of Her Majesty, the Queen. Ms. Sawalak, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your introduction, and please join me to celebrate the International Days of Persons with Disability as it's the day of the remarkable revolutions and paradigm shifts on disability and developments from charity-based model to human rights-based model since 1981. Yes, the topic is really, fantastic and very wonderful. Disability is not a barrier, and discrimination is. So my, short piece, my brief and short, very short presentations will be highlights, and will take you to discover with me what is really mean to disability and what are barriers and how disability and barriers are built on create discriminations on the ground of disabilities within impact to others intersecting the forms of discriminations. Next slide, please. In our region, Southeast Asia, ASEAN state members already ratified, all of them already ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the Conventions of Children and the also the conventions on the eliminations of all forms of discriminations or CEDAW. So we have a lot of opportunity to to enable our society to be more inclusive. So, however, we have to understand this only at the first article before we implement it, especially the government as a state party has their own obligation under article number 4 to success implementations of article number 4. They have to understand article number 1. So I would like to draw to your attention to with me to decode the suggestion or recommendations addressed by the CRPD. Article number 1, the purpose or the objectives. The purpose of the convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disability, and to promote the respect for their inherent dignities. And persons with disability include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which in its interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation on equal basis with others. There are a meaning, there are dimension, and the multiple perspective within this, article number 1. So the protect, you can see that the first paragraph, promote, protect, and fulfill these perspective are human rights concept. And rights holder, you can see the target. They already identify the target. The CRPD identify the target. The rights holders are all persons with disabilities, mean everyone, regardless their impairment, gender, age, status, or any kind of identities or sexual orientations or indigenous or geographic area. And also impairment, you can see the keyword. The impairments mean long-term physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory. This kind of, the umbrella of the impairments. Also, therefore, persons with disability does not mean mean they are disabled, because persons with disability mean mean person who have some kind of impairments and then interact with various barriers. So what are various barriers? So I will talk it later to next slide. But the various barrier deprives or prevents or hinder persons with disability to have a full and effective participation in society on equal basis with others. You can see that on equal basis, it means, difference, it means discriminations has been, running if persons who have the certain impairment has interaction with societal barriers. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And you can see the diagram from the first slide. Long-term impairment at the center. Long-term impairments are only, personal factors. And then person who have their own personal factor as certain impairment may have different gender, different age perspective, age length, like might be children, might be older, they might be ethnic minority, they might live in, Iceland or archipelago or very remote area, or they might be homeless or migrant worker. And then with it, their impairment plus these, societal construct, gender, aging, children, older, old, ethnic, migrant, homeless, economics, and geographics, remote, or even the geographic area. They have the other, in the barriers direct to, their disability, with in attitudinal barriers, physically barrier, and barrier inaccessible to ICT, information communication technology and assistive devices and assistive technology and systematic barriers. The attitudinal barrier is like person who have a disability or women with disability, migrant worker with disability are a sinner or they are not, productive. And also the lack of the accessibility in public transportation or public building or any infrastructure, and also the blind and deaf person cannot access to information and communication, and also technology due to there is no enough or adequate services related to sign language interpreter and the lack of understanding on language, language used by different identities. And systematic barriers mean law, policy, and any kind of legislation. And then you can see from and left and right, the most left and right in the pink, pink box. This is the civil and civil and political rights and economic and socio-cultural rights addressed in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. This is the issue of 3 aspects of human rights. And with it, hindered by, you can see the green, the green box. This is the societal construct, and then white boxes are barriers faced by person who have impairments. Next slide, please. This is the reality. But in the law and the societal perception, there is no societal construct. And in the law, always lack of gender perspective, age perspective, or other like migrant status, homeless, or other identity, indigenous. They just all the law focusing on 4 barriers, and left the societal construct behind, like gender. Many, I think most of from my study, most of disability specific law does not include gender. Children, even though 10 ASEAN member states already state members already ratified the convention. And then you can see that they don't recognize when they don't recognize the societal construct, even gender and age perspective. So the mechanism related to promote, protect, and fulfill civil, economic, and social rights are almost lack in mainstream society to ensure full and effective participation of persons with disability as equal basis with others. That whenever, wherever barriers are existing, discrimination is running. Discrimination on the ground of disability is running. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. A general situation on access to justice, when you get a picture, a picture from the reality identified by the convention and also practice from the society and national law. The general situation to access to justice right now allow 91% of women with disability have not yet been aware of their right regarding to disability legislation and mechanism for elimination of discrimination against persons with disability, and allow 83% of women with disability believe that the government mechanisms are unreliable and untrustworthy. You can see from the example, this paragraph, this wording, the example from women with disability who face sexual abuse and violence. She said that even I have been discriminated, I won't report or file the claim to the responsible government agency, that because I would be asked for compromise. On the other hand, I might be hate marked as a problematic person, and as a result, my access to rights-based services would be more difficult or even denied. You can see this is a reality from rights holder who face violence and sexual abuse. and how difficulty. So she get a double or multiple barrier in access to justice as she is a woman, right? Gender perspective would be one barrier, and also the impairment and other status maybe become the other double barriers. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, the other crisis issue is that the denial of legal capacity of persons with disability under, national law, such as some type of jurisdictions acts, public health acts, and financial transactions, and the incorrect understanding of the laws of guardian, caregivers, personal assistant, causing the substitute decision making and informed consent. And persons with disability who have not registered in the civil legislation as the citizen might be Thai citizen are disqualified from applying for persons with disability ID cards, which oppose the intentions of the National Act. But however, these three bullet points are the example from national, especially from Thai perspectives. But the same, the key, the key issue are almost the same in our 10 ASEAN state members. Thank you. I think next slide is only pictures to show you, okay, twin tech approach. So we need to apply both, side twin tech approach to establish a mechanism to eliminate all form of barrier and prohibit form of discrimination. And at the same time, we have to empower a person with disability or rights holder, might be empowerment program, leadership activity, a capacity building. Then both, right holder and duty bearers. Next slide, please. This show you the awareness raising program to sign language interpreter. As CRPD stated that sign language interpreters is a human language, but the perception and understanding through the sign language is the sign language interpreter is still really really low. Next slide, please. It is a gathering of persons with disability, especially women with disability in different identity in Asia Pacific. Yeah, to raise their voice and amplify their needs to societies. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Sonia, for a very informative presentation.
Yeah.
Clear insights on the barriers affecting persons with disability access to justice. And I particularly like the twin track approach, which is, I think, very holistic and inclusive. So thank you for sharing. All right, I take great pleasure to introduce our second esteemed speaker, Honorable Judge Bambang Heri Mulyono, is the head of the Agency on Research Development and Judicial Training of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Indonesia. He has held several positions as a judge all over Indonesia since 1919. He is a renowned judicial reform champion at the SCRI, where he has been since 2004. And since 2000, Judge Mulyono has participated in various national and international courses as a resource person on environmental law and enforcement. At the ASEAN level, he has been the key person from the Supreme Court and is a member of the working group of the Judicial Education and Training of the Council of ASEAN Chief Justice, which is co-chaired by Indonesia and the Philippines. He has tirelessly collaborated with various international organizations on environmental law initiatives for judges and has been a strong advocate for gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. The floor is yours, Judge Bambang.
Okay. Thank you, Darlene. Good afternoon, everyone. It's glad to be here with you all. I will share my presentation? Okay. So if I have a loss of memory about the English, perhaps interpreter can help me to say in English. But before I present my presentation, I would like to say thank you because this book is, oh, sorry. Cannot. The 8 indicator of sensitive to the victim in the court is very useful. This product by ASEAN-ACT. So we spread this book from ASEAN-ACT to the in many websites of the courts in very large area of Indonesia. My presentation is will talk about the role of the court in implementing of the rights of the person with disabilities. We have several training for these issues for general court, for religious court, and for the state administrative court. And also the last is our military court. We also transfer of knowledge and information about how the court give a proper accommodation for the person with disabilities. So I will present the next file. When we are talk about person with disabilities, so I think as a apparatus of the court, we always ask about the legal basic or legal aspect, and mentioned by Ms. Kun Sawaluk before that there are many convention and international act that we can apply convention. For example, Indonesia also ratified of United Nations Convention in 2011. It's about the right of person with disabilities, and this ratified applying in Indonesia with law number 19 2011, and continue that this convention is also making to guarantee that this will be effective access to justice for the person with disabilities. So it's also mandate state parties to conduct appropriate training. This is a part of our responsibility in the administration of in the field of administration of justice. The ratification of UNCRPD requires Indonesia to improve services in all aspects for persons with disabilities, including in a legal and judicial aspect. So by the ratification of this convention, and also Indonesia making of law number 8 2016. It's about law on disabilities. This is as a legal aspect. It's very important for judiciaries. This demonstrated that Indonesia commitment to protecting the right of person with disabilities. So we, as a judiciaries, must prepare all of services for the person with disabilities. As mandated by the Indonesian Disabilities Law number 8, 2016, all of law enforcement agencies are required to provide accommodation, reasonable accommodation for person with disabilities in judicial process. So since if this is about a civil case, or when they came to the advocate is a part of law enforcer. So this is also required that advocate must prepare services for the disabilities. And also in the criminal, the police officer also must preparing all services for the person with disabilities. Thus, in 2020, government of Indonesia also enacted a government regulation. This is concerning adequate accommodation for person with disabilities, especially this in judicial process. So this regulation number 39 2020. This is also as a legal aspect to our step in preparing services for disabilities. Two aspects of appropriate accommodation according to this government regulation. The first is need adequate accommodation in terms of services. Among others, was as a non-discriminatory treatment, effective communication, disability assistance, and language translator, interpreters. And second is adequate accommodation in terms of facilities and infrastructure. There's more physical than soft skill. That must be adopted by the obstacle faced to by person with disabilities. There's, among others, vision, hearing, speech, communication, mobility, concentration, intellectual, emotional, behavior, etc. So this two aspects must be well prepared by the court. Oops. So what is the roles of the court in protecting the right of the person with disabilities? I will share about Indonesia experience. So the spirit to give facility for the disabilities is rise during about 5 years. So although before 2020, there are some court that's already preparing facilities, but since 2020, there are many courts in Indonesia that they have a responsibility to give facility for the disabilities. Because if we look at the policy, the Director General of General Court and also Director General of Religious Court with different policy, but they have the similar policy. The first Director General of General Court policy to concerning guidelines for the implementation of services for person with disabilities at the first instance and appeal court. I mean, high court is appeal court and district court is first instance. The same action also from Director General of Religious Court. And the last is Director General of Military Court and State Administrative Court, also making the decree similar with Director General of General Court and Religious Court. This decree is regulate about a standard operating procedure SOP for one-stop integrated services. So to implement of this policy, they need to develop training modules. The picture at the right picture. Sorry, it's about module, a training module for short training or medium training is about human rights and related with court and disabilities. Training judicial training center joined together with the Human Rights Center in University of University of Islam Indonesia. We make this module and we use as material for the short training and medium training. I mean, short training is about 2 days or 3 days, and medium training is about 1 week. Depend on the training need analysis. And we are making TOT, training of trainers, about this training to spread with another judges and also apparatus of the court. So we are conduct regular training for judges and court apparatus, court staff, because it's not only a need for the judges to understanding, to have a sense, and also they have procedure how to examine when the victim, when the witness is a human person with disabilities. And at the short training or workshop or medium training is relevant with the disabilities law, also government regulation, and Supreme Court decree, including decree of the Director General. Is the related with the protection of person with disabilities. And government, I mean, the court under the Supreme Court, in 2020, there are 50 pilot project. So 50 courts as a pilot for court services for person with disabilities. And also government designated 11 court to serve as a pilot location. This is a break practice. So another court can visit to the 11 court as the sharing of because as a pilot project, so they can understand how to make the best facility for the person with disabilities. This has happened in 2020, and then we're making a survey. This survey is for apparatus of the court and all over Indonesia. You know, we have about 30 employee of the court in Indonesia, but this respondent is 2,290 of court apparatus, but the result is making us something sad. Was not happy because 74% at the time respondents said that the court did not provide access to component who could assist person with disabilities. You know that the respondent is a court apparatus. So, we need the surveys must fulfill with honesty. And 94% respondents state that they did not have access to translator which might be needed by person with disabilities in dealing with the law. So we need more improvement. And 96% respondents state that the court do not have access to expert of psychologists who can help person with disability when they are faced with the law. You know, many places in Indonesia is islands. So we must understand about this condition also. But with the training, and training is not only by classical training, we are also making of online training, only perhaps 3 hours, half of the training. We share about a court sensitive to the victim, court sensitive to disabilities. So we need action plan during after this survey. We need equal court services. We must preparing many services, and this is will be applied in every court. And also suitable accommodation for disabilities, and third is a court that comfortable and safe for disabilities. So we need that every disabilities feel safe and can enjoy during in the court. This is also experience of Indonesia. Court facilities for person with disabilities. We preparing the special sign for disabled parking, guide tile or guiding blocks, instruction in Braille, including if there are lift or escalator, and also every information that cannot read by the person with disability of to read. The entrance of the courtroom is designed to be accessible for person with disabilities. So many court building was changed, and then accessible toilet for the person with disabilities. And under the general director general, they make something like evaluation about how the court give the services for the person with disabilities. And also disability friendly staff is very important to give them as a guide to and preparing, for example, equipment for disabilities. I just take some picture like this also available in website of the every court in Indonesia. After 2020, almost every website of the court they have something like court services for person with disabilities. So in this is Indonesian language, and the picture, for example, Pengadilan Negeri Wonosari, this means District Court of Wonosari. There are also many equipment for disabilities, and also the chair, special chair for disabilities, right now is almost every court they have preparing this equipment. I think that's sharing our experiment in Indonesia. Terima kasih. Thank you. Back to you, Derek.
Terima kasih, Judge Bambang, for the excellent presentation highlighting Indonesia's strong legal framework and, of course, the role of the courts in protecting the rights of the persons with disabilities. I'm sure a lot of our participants are interested to know more about these laws and its socialization in practice. What you've shared, Judge Bambang, is really an eye-opener, so thank you. For our third distinguished presenter, she's the founder and director of the Action to Community Development Institute in Vietnam. Ms. Nguyen Thi Lan An is a tireless advocate for the rights of people with disabilities and was instrumental in Vietnam's successful ratification of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2014. Ms. Anne relentlessly advocated for the provision of sign language translation on late-night television programs and in the official news hour of state television. She also advocated for policies that improve accessibility for persons with disabilities, such as the Vietnam Standard Criteria, Universal Design in Transportation, and the amended Labor Code. An alumna of several prestigious universities in Australia, Belgium, and in the US, her tremendous efforts in advocating for persons with disabilities rights and taking action on disability issues have earned her numerous accolades and recognitions, the most recent of which is the Henry Viscardi Achievement Award in 2020. May I now invite you, Ms. Anne, to take the floor, please.
Thank you. My presentation in slide is in English, and I would like to share with you in Vietnamese. So please change your channel. Thank you. Related about the my presentation with the human trafficking related about the person with disabilities. So I would like to present it in Vietnamese language. Xin chào các anh các chị ạ.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to act from the social organization which are engaged in the field of people with disability, and I would like to share with you the topic of anti-human trafficking for in nexus with people with disability in Vietnam. Due to the time constraint, I'd like to talk briefly about these issues as well as the information on people with disabilities in Vietnam. Next slide, please. From the statistic of General Statistics Office in Vietnam, we have 7.06% of the national population people with disability. That is about 6.2 million people. However, that is only statistics. The actual figures shows that in Vietnam, we have about 12.1% equal to 15% of the population being people with disability. And the rate of people with disability in rural areas is higher than that in urban area, about 1.5 times higher. And according to the 5 groups of living standards in Vietnam, in the poorest group account for 20% of the national population. And the rate of people with disability in group 1 is 11.2%. And this people with disability rate in group 1 is 3 times higher than its rate in group 5. People with disability community lives across the country. And we have different gender, religion. And now only 26 out of 63 provinces have people with disability association to protect the rights of their members. We do have other organizations, but they are not the fully registered legal status. Next slide, please. And when we look into the types of disabilities and data, now the people with physical disability account for the highest number. And the next one, the group of people with cognitive disability, mental illness. And the last group is to do with the sensory impairment. About almost half the number of the people with disabilities, say more than 52% can live in permanent houses. And nearly 3/4 of the people with disability can access clean water and hygienic conditions. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And now, the number of people who can receive the daily support is about 26.7%. And the children with disability going to school at the 1/3. And 7 out of 100 people are having vocational training, and 31.7% have jobs. And now in Vietnam, we have adopted a UN Convention on Rights of People with Disability in 2015, and we don't reserve any article out of this. Particularly, we do have articles to do with the identity right, freedom to move for people with disability. And the law on people with disability 2010 took effect in 1st January 2011. And we do have articles to protect the rights for people with disability of different types of disability in all aspects in order to support their life. And now we are in the process to implement the program to support people with disability for the period 2021 to 2030. Also, in addition to that, we do have a very good policies relevant to people with disability in the current context. However, to implement this policy, it is not at all easy. And normally, we do see certain difficulties. And possible to us to be honest to you, talking about anti-human trafficking in Vietnam, you have got some information, but I would like to share with you some statistics to do with your tip in Vietnam that I have been updated from official sources. According to the statistics from Ministry of Public Security between 2016 to end June 2019, there are more than 1,000 tip cases with 1,500 traffickers with more than 2,600 victims. And particularly in 2019, there were about 370 tip cases with more than 550 victims. And tip often occurs in provinces with lines with China and Cambodia and Laos because these areas are often difficult to access, and the local people often have difficult living conditions. Next slide, please. And talking about tip and PW in Vietnam, up to now, Vietnam has not really recorded any case of people with disability being trafficked in the official information system. However, as we have known, some types of disability have a higher risk of being trafficked, particularly in the border provinces, say people with intellectual disability, mental illness, or hearing and speech disability. Particularly those with hearing and speech disability in the border provinces are more likely at risk to become the sex workers. And the elder people with disability who are unmarried are easily lured into the love scam performed by the bad guys. And recently, we have seen certain cases suffering from love scam, but not yet trafficked across the border for being forced to work in as a sex workers. We can see many cases with the people with hearing and speech impairment And within the framework of my presentation, I would like to come up with the following recommendations. The first one is a necessity to improve the legal framework on anti-human trafficking to consider the vulnerable groups such as people with disability. And also the government should have the right sanction mechanism to implement the policy in the time to come. The early, the better. Secondly, we need to conduct training programs and raising awareness among the community, particularly among the people with disability in anti-trafficking, particularly in the border provinces. And also necessary for us to implement a practical model in supporting and protecting victims, particularly victims with disability. And in these models, necessary for us to pay due attention to the facilities infrastructure to support to help the people with disabilities so that they can have the best possible access to information or support. Say we need to have a side translation for people with hearing or speech impairment. Or we also have the facility to support people with visual impairment or psychological counseling for those who have mental illness or psychological problem. So I try to be very brief on this topic, and I do hope to have information from you all. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anne. Those are very excellent recommendations, and thank you for highlighting the importance of data and disability awareness to better understand the trends and improve on the disability measures already in place. So now let us go back to the polls and check the results. The team will post the results now. There you go. Allow me to read the poll results again for purposes of translations. So on poll question number 1, what must be prioritized to ensure persons with disabilities effectively access justice? So we can see that 56% said that laws and policies on disability must be prioritized, followed by accessibility and reasonable accommodation that garnered 21%, and then training for justice and non-justice state actors, 15%, and the last only at 8% national budget allocation. On the second question, what most hinders the protection of persons with disability in the justice system? We see 38% is the lack of understanding of the intersectionality of disability, particularly human trafficking, followed by 18% weak legal framework on disability, 17% lack of meaningful participation of persons with disabilities in accessing justice, and then 16% no adequate measure to ensure persons with disabilities access justice, and then lack of data to measure interventions, 10%. So to our participants, thank you for sharing with us your thoughts on this. We will now request our panel to share their thoughts on the results of the poll questions. So may I call on Ms. Saolak to please give your reaction first, followed by Judge Bambang, and then by Ms. Lan Ang.
How many minutes do I have?
2 minutes.
Huh?
2 minutes. 3 minutes to react on both results.
Okay, I think that the results is follow the convention, because it is these two questions are two questions are twin tag. You are twin tag and necessarily, If you remember my last slide, that we need, to solve the problem, we need to apply twin tax approach from rights holders and also duty bearers. So the first question is, it's about systematic barriers. Yeah, it is important to have the law, the what we call or we call the specific measure or comprehensive measures to ensure all participations and also to ensure the all forms of discriminations are prohibited. So the system is a policy and laws is necessary. Yeah, along with second questions, understanding. The understanding of intersectionality on disabilities imply to attitudinal barriers. And as we know, the attitudinal barriers are the clouds of or the foundations of other kinds of barriers and build multiple discriminations. I think my point is that this is important. Data is and the less is, like I mean yeah, the other choice also are necessarily in what we call in harmonizing with law and understanding. I mean paradigm shifts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sawalak. So Judge Bambang, please.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I think that's makes sense that law and policy on disabilities is the highest must be prioritized, because this is a legal aspect for them to protect the person with disabilities. And in my vision for court services, I think the second priority is training for judges, training for apparatus of the court. So this to make understanding for apparatus and judges how to prepare, how to apply a proper procedure to the person with disabilities. And the hinders for the protection of disabilities, I think, yeah, this makes sense also, lack of understanding intersectionality of disability, but in the term of court services, the hinders, but we limited interpreter as how person who can guide to the person with disabilities, because we in rare in a rural area, as we are limited person with competent and access to the court with have skill as interpreter for disabilities. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Bambang. And now, Miss Anne, please.
Yes, I think so. I agree with Saulak and Mr. Bambang sometimes. And related about my concern with the first question, priorities to ensure person with disability to effective access that state. I think that they are first thing is government should be allocated national budgets. Because of if they allocate the budget to this topic, they have to follow, because of they have to have a target and they have to follow the target that. The second thing we related about the hinder of the protection of the person with disability. I think it's the same with the other lack of understanding the intersectionality of the disability, particularly the human trafficking, because of the in the past or even right now in the moment, not all of the people understanding about the human trafficking with people with disability, even in my country, because they think that the person with disability who are stayed home, no one focus on them, on no one working with them, so they cannot have any kind of the thing affected related about the human trafficking. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Miss Anne. Miss Solak, you would like to add something?
Yep.
Yes.
Just one minute, because these two questions should be, in have synergies, synergy implementations. We cannot, implement only stand alone activity like, okay, we have law and policy, but we don't have the any kind of training regardless to attitudinal barrier or understanding on intersectionality. And at the same time, we need a participation, meaningful participations of persons with disability in as an all aspect of the implementations on make the system changes. However, the understanding is the most important, because if people or the implementator or policy maker have a clear understanding toward disability and has a positive attitude, so all each issue would be happen, because right would be happen, and they will think that as a being and human, there are many possible ways to achieve the goal settings. And although for the number one, national reasonable accommodation and accessibility is also the key. The committees really pay attention to this matter. Or every single question during the dialogue, the committee will ask, how do you provide accessibility, or what kind of system do you have, to ensure accessibility and reasonable accommodation and non-discrimination in access to justice in all aspects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Salawak, Salawak, and of course, Judge Bambang and Ms. Anne for your well thought reaction. And I totally agree with you, and of course with our participants, that there must be a holistic approach to all of this to be able to achieve what we want in terms of looking at the measures on disability and human trafficking. So now let us look at two videos. We'll be playing two videos, and again, we'll be requesting for our panel to give their reaction to these two videos. And of course, participants are also free to give their reaction in the comment chat box. So this first video is a short quote from the UN Special Rapporteur for Trafficking in Persons, Professor Shoban Malali, who discussed about disability and human trafficking in an international event held earlier this year.
There are very significant gaps currently in planning and programming to counter trafficking, specifically in relation to ensuring that we are preventing trafficking of persons with disabilities and children with disabilities. So, for example, children in institutional settings or persons with disabilities who are dependent on a caregiver may be particularly vulnerable to exploitation. But because of the lack of awareness of risks of trafficking and lack of access to information for people with disabilities in accessible formats, we are not really being effective in our prevention actions. So many anti-trafficking action plans at domestic level don't include specific attention to ensuring that information is accessible to persons with disabilities, that legal assistance is accessible, that the appropriate procedural accommodations have been made, and that safe accommodation and shelter is available to persons with disabilities who may also be victims of trafficking. So there are multiple areas where we really have significant gaps. Also within the criminal justice system, for victims and survivors of trafficking, we need to ensure that accommodations have been made so that they can participate fully in legal proceedings, and that they are accommodated in doing that. But I think the critical message really is to think about prevention. In all of our information awareness campaigns, in our programming, are we ensuring that we are thinking about specific risks that may be faced by adults and children with disabilities? And we need to listen to them and ensure that they are participating in the planning and design of prevention actions.
We will play another video. This is a short sample from a toolkit produced by the U.S. National Resource Center for Reaching Victims on how to accommodate a person with a disability when reporting a crime and when preparing one to testify before the courtroom.
I'm going to try to take a report from what the questions I ask you and whatnot. If you could just try to slow down just a little bit, maybe take a deep breath. It's just you and me here right now, so try not to be too nervous. But you know, I'm going to ask you some questions, and as you answer them, I'm going to try to write down pretty much everything you say. If that's okay. Is there anything, by the way, that you need right now to feel safer?
Sorry. Yeah, actually, could you tell me who else is around? I've never been to this stop before, so I'm not familiar with it.
You're at the Davis MBTA station, so we're in the busway. There's some people walking maybe at 200 feet away from us, but it's just you and me here right now, okay? First of all, what's your name?
It's Molly Smith.
Today to talk about the trial and what you might want to say during the trial.
Yes, I remember.
Last time we met, you said that you were feeling a little bit nervous about the trial, and I asked what might help you feel a little better, and you said that seeing a picture of the courtroom would help. So today, I brought a picture of the courtroom. Now, let's talk about the trial. We're going to cover a couple of things, like who will be there and what their jobs are. We'll talk about what the trial will be like and where people might be sitting. And we'll also go over who is going to speak and when they're going to speak. Is there anything else that would be helpful?
It'd be good to know what it's like.
All right, there you go. And maybe now request or invite our esteemed panelists to share their reaction. Can I now start in reverse? So we'll have Miss Anne first, and then Judge Van Bang, and then please. Miss Anne, you have the floor.
I think that this video is very useful for the government to interview the victim of the human trafficking.
Miss Anne.
And they have the good skill to interview, and they need a good space, safe space to interview the person with disability.
Ms. Anne, can you also share with us your thoughts on what Special Rapporteur Shoban mentioned about the importance of prevention, to think about the risk and to think about the participation of or listen to the persons with the disability and their participation in the process. And then she also mentioned about lack of awareness, lack of information in accessible formats. So can you also share your thoughts and reaction to that?
I think that the same everywhere with the person with disability, lack of the information, lack of the accommodation to support a person with disability, especially the woman with disability and girl with disability who haven't got enough the skill of the the notice to protect themselves. So if they don't have any kind of the information or the accommodation asset for them, they should be a victim in the future.
All right, thank you, Ms. And may we now hear from Judge Bambang?
Yeah, this is also answering the question in related with the video and also question in the chat room. Yeah. In Indonesia, we have a guideline for the judges and also for apparatus. We also have it available in the module, but in Indonesian language. So I think the guideline and also how to properly communication, properly procedure with the person with disabilities, and beside the guideline and the decree of the Supreme Court, it's also for monitoring and evaluation. We make a survey. This is to make ensure that every apparatus, every judges in the courts in very area in Indonesia must applying and respecting to the disabilities. Darlene, you're still muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Judge Bambang. Any reaction to also the message of Special Rapporteur Shaban? Judge Bambang?
Yeah, sorry.
Any reaction also to the message of Special Rapporteur Shaban? She was also talking about the significant gaps on accommodations were not made for persons with disabilities, and the importance of prevention as well, and the risk.
Yes. My comments is if we are aware, understanding, if we have the same rights, that disabilities is also a part of diversity of human. So I think this is ignoring the lack of the accommodation and lack of a proper communication.
All right, thank you, Judge Bambang. And may we now have Ms. Ola, please.
Thank you. For the first video, I think it is very kind of the police, female police officers to ask. To ask questions to female by lady, what she want to do and like something like that, and try to let down her need. However, I think it still need a reasonable accommodation, because she may need a personal assistant in terms of being understand the surrounding. The landscape or the surrounding of where she is standing, and also the reactions of officer, the police officer. And secondly, the police officer, can access to information, right, verbally. And she also the female blind also can provide information by and verbally. However, when policemen, the listen down what she is, she is reporting. The female bride could not access, could not know that she is really lie down. what she is reporting or not. It is correct or followed her report, or the written down. I mean, the written down issue would be imitate from her understanding, but not the real verbal report from her. I think it needs assistant. We can assistant to assist her. Secondly, why I am when I see this video, why the police officer does not invite her to talk in the office, for sit and talk at the office, police office. Why kids they're still stand talking at the car park. If it is happen in the reality, it seems that the attention, the understanding and respect to by lady would not be good. And the second video, it is necessary to have personal assistant who not care. It is not caregiver, personal assistant, whoever that lady really touch and respect. And then in this case, it is really sensitive, because a woman, I think, has sensory impairment, maybe Down syndrome or cerebral palsy. Something is about sensory, so she needs someone who understands and who can explain, clear, provide clear explanation to the police, but on behalf of her, but not like how to summary. I mean, caregiver, guardian is not possible. She needs someone who really understands the best interest, of the victims.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Sola. Can you also comment on the second video where the prosecutor was guiding the persons with disability? Any comment?
But I see two of them, you're talking like without any third person or personal assistant.
I see. Thank you. Any other comment also on the message of Special Rapporteur Shoban? All right, thank you so much, Ms. Sawalak, and you've raised a lot of good points there from the video. And thank you to our panelists for your reaction on the video. Let's now move on to the question and answer session. We have some questions from our participants in the chat box. I'll now give the floor to Chanapat to facilitate the question and answer.
Thank you, Attorney Darlene, and it's my pleasure to be moderating on this Q&A session. It has been a really fruitful discussion and presentation from all the panelists so far, and we have a number of questions coming in from the floor already. And I think a lot of questions directed at the Judge Bambang, especially because you have made a presentation including the survey result from the court, which is it kind of impressed a lot of audiences that the Supreme Court has been able to openly share this. So some of the questions that we have here is that, what are the Indonesian government plan in addressing issues that being raised in the survey result, particularly around the companions for persons with disability, access to translator, and access to psychologist, since this survey has started since 2020? So what has been, is there any progress that you are able to share with us and the audience? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chanapat. Since the last survey in the survey in 2020 until now, we don't look at the government. I think only enacted of the all of legal aspect, for example, the law, and also the decree. But the policy by the government is spread in as a local and not as at the national level. So, for example, in the court, in the judiciary under the Supreme Court, the policy is that facilitate to the disabilities is depend on the every court, but the central government doesn't give the budget for facilitation. So sometimes every court is different, the facilitation for the disabilities. So, but right now, because this is a part of evaluation for the court by the Supreme Court, right now it's almost all of the courts in Indonesia, there are available facilitation for the disabilities. But as a central government, we don't, until now, during pandemic 2020, until now, there are no new policy by government.
All right, thank you so much, Judge Bamman, for your response. And I think also some of the things that has been addressed in the survey has also been raised here as with the budget allocation, which is, of course, is one of the important things in terms of how to be able to build the to accommodate the person with disability to access justice system. And
the spirit is good.
Can I check whether we still have the panel Team Savalak and Miss Ann with us, because we also have some questions that we might be able to direct to them as well.
We call on Miss Ann Pom. She is in the room.
Hi, Miss Ann. Are you able to hear us here? Okay, you're here with us. Thank you. So some of the questions that we have here, and I hope that you will be able to give us some thoughts that as well, that as we are anti-human trafficking actors, or maybe for the talking about the criminal or crime in general, how could we better include the voice of person with disability, or to promote their rights and accommodate the needs, especially from those that living with mentally or intellectually disability? Are you able to share some thoughts or opinion on that? How can we do it better?
I think first of all, it should be that the organization of the human trafficking should be that the working closely and partnership with organization of people with disability in its country or in its province. For example, in Vietnam, if you need to to talk with the people with disability about this topic, you have to working with Vietnamese Federation on Disabilities, and especially in each type of the disabilities, they have their own organization. You have to talk with them first and prioritize the data of the quota of the budgeting for the person with disability in your project or program, because of the if you have a prioritize person with disability, when you're working with the government can concentrate can focus on that on the person with disability than in general. I think that two tips related about that. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And if I may ask further, in terms apart from the government, in addition to the government action and partnership with the civil society, what about the preventative measure? Is there any awareness raising campaign or the prevention measure that has been jointly done between the government and the civil society to help make sure that people with disability would not fall victim to crime in general, or particularly human trafficking crime?
Yeah, I think so. It should be the joint. And in Vietnam, as I mentioned in my presentation, that we haven't got any kind of data related about the person with disability who are the victim of human traffic. But the other topic, we always have the event or the public campaign with the corporation on both sides, the government, CSO, and OPD, Organization of Persons with Disability. I think that's quite open for Vietnam to working on the topic of the person with disability this moment.
Great to hear that. And also, I think it's great to hear that that you mentioned it's important to have the data to include the person with disability within the information that should help the government form the policy as well. And if I may pass on to Kun Savalak as well, are you able to make some comments about how can the government or how can the civil society or NGO sector work together to ensure that the data on person with disability as a victim of crime in general, or victim of particularly for human trafficking crime, how can we make sure that this will be done it will be included as a statistic or data collection to better understanding what is the situation and what is the scenario?
Hello.
Yes, Kun Savalak, we can hear you.
Yeah. I think it really need disability equality sensitivity trainings to the government officers, because disability is a cross-cutting. However, in reality, disability has been, several years, in more than 3 decades, put in the social welfare basket. And the data, in terms of the statistic to persons with disability, only, conducted under, mainly social welfare department and public health department, or maybe include the education minister, the Ministry of Education. However, in this, the data does not, incorporate each other. They have the different data. Even these 3 data sources are always difference with the data indicated at the National Statistics Office. So we need the one system, the corporate, harmonizing system, data collection system, following by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability recommendations, and the questionnaire set to conduct the household survey should be follow. Should be follow the recommendations of the Washington Group's questionnaires, which is the human rights and human rights models questions to expand the different identities and pay attention to the barriers faced by persons with disability, rather than focusing on impairment. By applying the Washington Group's questionnaires, the sets of the household survey questionnaire will expand to for instance, the barrier, what kind of difficulty or barriers the interviewers face in daily living, and then they will checklist. So we will have more detail on different dimensions of impairment. And then the number of persons who have impairment would be expanded not only to physically, or visible impairment, but will expand it to include persons who have invisible impairments like psychosocial disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khun Sawalak. I think you have raised really important point and really important details that there's still a lot to be worked on. And this is one of the things that ASEAN-ACT is looking to try to work on to make sure that this is the information and data that we encapsulate in forming policy. And we are trying to, this is what the work that we are trying to do. And who knows, in the future, we might need to have another session on this to talk further in details. So unfortunately, time is of the essence, and on behalf of the organizer, I have to apologize that we might not be able to answer all the questions we have, but thank you so much for the time and all the questions that coming in. And I would like to hand the floor back.
Thank you very much, Pom, for facilitating the question and answer. And thank you to our esteemed panelists for graciously answering all the questions from our participants. And for our participants, thank you for your thought-provoking questions and also for providing some comments on the videos as well. May I invite our esteemed experts the opportunity to share their final thoughts for our audience. After such a robust discussion, could you tell us as an individual or as an organization, what can we do to address the gaps identified and promote the rights of persons with disability who are victims of trafficking? So again, I'll give the floor to Ms. Sawalak, then to Judge Bambang, and then to Ms. Anne to share their thoughts on that question. Ms. Sawalak, you are on mute.
The conclusion, right?
Yes, please. Any final takeaway?
I think in ASEAN there is a lot of opportunity, different with, we have a lot of opportunity and strong identity as we have ASEAN. And then under ASEAN, there is a enabling master plans on promoting human rights of persons with disability, and enabling master plan already make a very good recommendation, include an action plan, how or what we have to do in different three social frameworks like economics, socio-cultural, and political and security frameworks. However, challenge is how do we make a friendly atmosphere to allow persons with disability and their representative organization to get involved from the beginning, not at the last, at the end of the state or the last the state, but we need to include representative of organizations of persons with disability, regardless gender, age, ethnicity, indigenous, gender, sexual orientation, etc. It would be really help government or state party, to understand the need and to save the national budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sawalak. I really like that providing the friendly atmosphere at the onset. Thank you so much. Judge Bambang, please.
Yeah, thank you for everyone. I think in the conclusion, we are in ASEAN hub. We need a continue of cooperation, collaboration, sharing of information in the term of how to give a best service for the person with disabilities, including perhaps a training online, which we can involve hundreds of participants among the ASEAN countries. And also we need ASEAN-ACT to make perhaps a short video. Then we can share to the every apparatus of the court, share to the judges in ASEAN countries as about the model of how to give the best service to the person with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Bambang, for the kind words. And of course, cooperation, collaboration, and building capacity are really important. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And maybe now call on Miss Anne, please.
Yes, I think that the own the nice word and own things that the Mr. Welcome on Mr. Bambang as the say, and I just talk that the human trafficking is affected everyone, including the person with disability. So if you are the government, you should follow the law and policy. You can update the law and policy. If you are the NGO or organization, a person with disability, you have to take action as soon as possible and include the person with disability in this topic. And protected the person with disability in the human trafficking is that mean that the human rights for everyone. And of course, we are the ASEAN community, so we have to follow the rule of the ASEAN community, and of course, we should be collaboration between the country by countries, province by province, regional by region. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anne, and for reiterating the recommendations you earlier mentioned on strengthening the law. And of course, ASEAN collaboration at community and at the regional level. Thank you, Ms. Anne. So those are very excellent and powerful last thoughts, advice from all of you, and we appreciate it very much. May I now invite our team leader, Dr. Lucia Pietropoli, to give a brief summary and her closing remarks. Dr. Lucia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Darlene. Ladies and gentlemen, and our distinguished panelists, I have the great pleasure of closing this webinar today, our final for the year, but definitely not our last. And I think it's really fitting to end with such an important discussion that has illuminated what we know so far about the nexus between disability and trafficking in persons. But importantly, this webinar has also highlighted what we don't know. There are clear gaps in data, gaps in awareness, and gaps in our collective knowledge as counter-trafficking communities about the vulnerability of people with disability to trafficking in persons. We also know very little about the experience of trafficked victims with a disability in accessing justice and other services. So coming together and discussing these gaps in our knowledge, asking questions rather than jumping in with answers, actively listening to people with disability and organisations of disabled persons, and really challenging our assumptions about the accessibility and fairness of existing laws, policies, and practices that are supposed to apply to all is actually the first step towards more disability inclusive counter-trafficking. Coming into this webinar and approaching the International Day of people with disability, I've also been reflecting on the theme for this year of creating accessible jobs and inclusive workplaces using technology and innovation. This theme really goes to the heart of one of the root causes of trafficking in persons. Lack of access to decent jobs is a key driver of trafficking. And whilst we don't know much about people with disability and their vulnerability to trafficking, we do know that people with disabilities are more likely to be unemployed and living in conditions of economic hardship and less likely to access social protection and other services. So increasing access to employment and decent jobs for people with disability is a key counter-trafficking strategy. I'd really like to thank all of our panelists today for an enlightening discussion, which was extremely evidence-based, contextual, and really highlighted what we know so far. So Kun Sawalak, thank you very much for your informative presentation on the rights-based approach to disability. You reminded us of the different kinds of impairment, those that are visible and those that are invisible, and how these combine with various barriers in society, be they physical, financial, political, social, or attitudinal, to create the individual experience of disability. You reminded us that people are not disabled, and they can be abled by making some changes to the environment. And often these changes are quite small. The statistics that you shared regarding women with disabilities in Thailand and their awareness of their rights and entitlements were very concerning, and a stark reminder for all of us that rights-based approaches to disability, those prescribed in the CRPD, are far from institutionalized and normalized in many countries in this region. You also highlighted some really important issues, such as the lack of credibility often afforded to people with disability as witnesses in a courtroom, and the lack of access to legal identity. These are both huge barriers to accessing justice. And I really liked that you suggested some improvements to the videos we showed of law enforcement and prosecutors interviewing witnesses with disability, including the role of aides and facilitators and other measures that can be taken to make people with disability feel comfortable and supported. Judge Bapak Bangbang, terima kasih banyak. You showed us that Indonesia is really a leader in the region with its own rights-based legislation to protect and advance the rights of people with disability. You highlighted that justice actors in Indonesia are not just disability aware, they're also accommodating the needs, rights, and preferences of people with disability. It was really positive to hear that so many courts in Indonesia, including general courts, religious courts, even military courts, have made reasonable adjustment for people with disability, ranging from things like sign interpreters to infrastructure improvements. And I do remember personally back in 2018 visiting one of the only accessible courts in Indonesia in Gunung Kidul in the Jogja region. So it's so wonderful to hear from you that there are now many, many accessible courts in Indonesia, and it is indeed mandatory to make these accommodations. And finally, Ms. An, you provided us with a great snapshot of the prevalence of disability in Vietnam. It was particularly interesting to see that people in rural areas are 1.5 times more likely to have a disability than people in urban areas. We also know that people living in rural areas and border areas are more vulnerable to trafficking in persons. So that this means our prevention and counter-trafficking responses in Vietnam that are targeted to rural areas need to be tailored to ensure that no one is left behind and that those messages reach everybody. You also provided some great recommendations that we would love to take forward in cooperation with you and your organisation. And there's a real opportunity, of course, with the review of Vietnam's TIP law coming up in 2023 and 2024 to make that law more inclusive for people with disabilities. So let us make this discussion the first of many more as we start to build our knowledge and our understanding of the complex nexus between disability and trafficking in persons. As some of you may know, ASEAN-ACT is undertaking a groundbreaking study in partnership with La Trobe University Australia and local researchers and DPOs on this very important topic. We will be keeping you updated, and we may even come back to you, as Kun Pom said, with another webinar focused on our findings once they're available. Thank you all for your interest in this important topic and for your commitment to our webinar series throughout 2022. We have certainly very much enjoyed this series and learned a lot ourselves from bringing this incredible community of practice together. Since this is the last one for the year, I would just like to acknowledge our wonderful facilitator, both of our facilitators, and our host and our mastermind of the ASEAN-ACT webinar series, Darlene Pajarito. And I'd also like to acknowledge our whole team who work behind the scenes to make this happen. We look forward to connecting with you all again in 2023, as we will be just as committed to driving forward innovative and inclusive counter-trafficking responses in the ASEAN region, and we hope that you all will be too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucia, for that brilliantly capturing the essence of today's discussion and for closing the webinar on a high note. And of course, thank you for the very kind words. It's a collective effort of all of us. And indeed, this is not our last webinar, as we will have more for you next year. So again, in behalf of ASEAN-ACT, please accept our warmest appreciation. It has been an honor and pleasure to have you, Judge Bambang Harry Mulyono, Ms. Sawalak Tongguay, Ms. Nguyen Tilan An. Our warmest thanks to all of you. This is such a fascinating discussion to end the week. And it is our hope that all our participants have gained a lot of insights and learnings from our experts in this webinar. So we'd love, again, to our audience, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So kind reminder, please fill up the one-page feedback survey. The link again is shared in the chat box. You will receive your certificate of attendance on the email address that you have provided in the survey. So this Zoom webinar recording will be uploaded to our portal where you can access it, including the presentations of our three wonderful presenters, and then the material, and of course, any materials that they shared with us in relation to this webinar. Again, also the portal is posted in the chat box. We will have more exciting webinars in 2023. So see you next year. Please stay safe and well. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Darlene.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you very much. Terima kasih, Judge.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Terima kasih.